Ethan Caldwell stood at his kitchen window, watching thick snowflakes hammer against the glass like they had somewhere urgent to be. The wind howled through the narrow streets of his Boston neighborhood, rattling shutters and bending trees at unnatural angles. He held a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, staring out at nothing in particular, the way he did most nights. The house felt too big, too quiet, too much like a monument to everything he'd achieved and nothing he'd actually lived. He was about to turn away when he saw them. Two shadows huddled against the brick wall across the street, barely visible through the blizzard, one taller, one small, both trembling. Ethan's chest tightened. He set the mug down and moved to the front door without thinking, yanking on his coat and boots. The cold hit him like a wall the second he stepped outside, but he kept moving, crossing the icy street with careful, deliberate steps. When he got close enough, he saw her clearly. A woman, maybe in her early 30s, wrapped in a jacket far too thin for this weather. Her arms were locked around a little boy who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, his face buried against her chest. Her lips were blue. Her whole body shook. "Hey," Ethan said gently, crouching down so he wouldn't tower over them. "You can't stay out here. You'll freeze." The woman looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. She didn't speak right away, just held her son tighter, like she was afraid Ethan might take him. The boy peeked out from her coat, his cheeks red and raw from the wind. "I'm not going to hurt you," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I live right there. I have heat, blankets, food. Please, come inside." She hesitated, and Ethan could see the war happening behind her eyes. Trust versus survival. Hope versus fear. Finally, she nodded, just barely. Ethan helped them to their feet, and together they stumbled across the street and into his townhouse. The warmth inside hit them all at once, and the little boy let out a small, relieved sound. Ethan guided them to the couch, grabbed every blanket he could find, and wrapped them both up like they were made of glass. "I'm calling for help," he said, already pulling out his phone. "You need a doctor." "No," the woman said, her voice hoarse and cracked. "We're fine." "You're not fine," Ethan said, not unkindly. "Your lips are blue. You're shaking so hard you can barely hold your son." "I'm calling. It's okay." She didn't argue after that. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe she knew he was right. Ethan dialed, explained the situation, and was told an EMT unit would be there within 15 minutes. He hung up and turned back to them. "I'm Ethan," he said. "What's your name?" "Lila," she whispered. "This is Jonah." Jonah was staring at Ethan with wide, uncertain eyes. Ethan gave him a small smile. "You like hot chocolate, Jonah?" The boy nodded. Ethan went to the kitchen and made 2 mugs, one with extra marshmallows. When he brought them back, Lila's hands were still shaking too much to hold her steady, so Ethan set it on the table in front of her. Jonah took his carefully, like it was something precious. The EMTs arrived quickly, their voices calm and professional as they checked Lila's vitals. "Severe hypothermia," they said. "Exhaustion. Dehydration." They wanted to take her to the hospital, but she refused, her eyes darting to Jonah with a panic Ethan understood without explanation. "I'll stay with him," Ethan said. "I promise. You go get checked out, and I'll keep him safe right here." Lila looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Whatever she found must have been enough, because she nodded. The EMTs wrapped her in thermal blankets and guided her toward the door. Before she left, she turned back. "Thank you," she said, and her voice broke on the word. "Don't thank me yet," Ethan said softly. "Just come back." When the door closed, Ethan turned to Jonah, who looked smaller than ever sitting alone on that big couch. "Your mom's going to be okay," Ethan said. "They're going to make sure she's warm and healthy. And while she's gone, you and I are going to hang out. Sound good?" Jonah nodded, but his eyes were still full of worry. Ethan sat down beside him. "You want to watch a movie? Play a game?" "I've got a pretty boring house, but I think I can find something." "Do you have books?" Jonah asked quietly. Ethan smiled. "I do." They spent the next 2 hours on the couch. Jonah curled up under a blanket while Ethan read to him from an old collection of adventure stories he'd had since he was a kid. Jonah's eyes grew heavy, his head nodding forward, and eventually he fell asleep against Ethan's arm. Ethan stayed still, not wanting to wake him, and realized with a strange ache in his chest that he hadn't felt this needed in years. Lila came back just before midnight. She looked better, steadier, though exhaustion still clung to her like a second skin. Ethan met her at the door, and she immediately looked past him to Jonah, who was still asleep on the couch. "He's okay," Ethan said. "We read. He fell asleep about an hour ago." Leela's eyes filled with tears, and she covered her mouth with one hand. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Ethan said, "but you should stay. Both of you, at least for tonight. It's still freezing out there, and you need rest." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Lila looked at him, and something in her expression crumbled. She nodded, and Ethan showed her to the guest room upstairs. He carried Jonah up carefully, laying him on the bed and tucking him in. Lila sat on the edge of the mattress, brushing her son's hair back from his forehead. "You're a good mom," Ethan said quietly. Lila didn't look at him. "I haven't felt like one in a long time." Over the next few days, the storm raged on, and Lila and Jonah stayed. Ethan learned their story in pieces. Lila had been a teacher at an elementary school in a struggling neighborhood. She'd stood up for a student who was being abused at home, reported it, fought for the child's safety. But the family had connections, money, influence. The school board turned on her. She was accused of overstepping, of causing trouble, of being unstable. They fired her. She couldn't find another job. The bills piled up. She lost her apartment. And suddenly she was on the street with a 6-year-old boy and nowhere to go. Ethan listened, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. "That's not right," he said. "None of that is right." "No," Lila agreed. "But it happened anyway." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just made sure they had everything they needed. Food, warmth, safety. Slowly, the tension in Lila's shoulders began to ease. Jonah started to smile more, to laugh. He and Ethan built a blanket fort in the living room. They made pancakes that turned out lopsided and delicious. They played cards and watched movies and talked about nothing important. And somehow it felt like everything. Ethan realized he didn't want them to leave. When the storm finally passed and the city began to dig itself out, Ethan sat down with Lila at the kitchen table. "Stay," he said. "Not just for a few days. Stay until you're back on your feet. Stay as long as you need." Lila stared at him. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan thought about it. "Because I can. And because I think maybe I need you here as much as you need to be here." Lila stayed. Weeks turned into months. Ethan helped Lila rebuild. He connected her with lawyers, advocates, people who believed her story and wanted to help. She started working with a nonprofit that supported families in crisis, using her experience as a teacher and her own painful journey to guide others. She was brilliant at it, compassionate and fierce and unbreakable. Jonah thrived. He started school again, made friends, brought home drawings that Ethan hung on the fridge like they were masterpieces. The house that had once felt too big and too quiet was now full of life, full of laughter, full of warmth. Ethan started a nonprofit of his own, one that supported educators who'd been wrongfully terminated, who'd stood up for their students and paid the price. Lila helped him build it from the ground up, and together they made a difference. Real, tangible, life-changing difference. And somewhere along the way, Ethan fell in love. He didn't mean to. He didn't plan it. But he'd watch Lila reading to Jonah. Before bed, her voice soft and steady, and his chest would ache. He'd see her smile over her morning coffee, exhausted but hopeful, and he'd think, This is what I've been missing." A year after the night he found them in the storm, Ethan made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread. The kind of meal they'd shared 100 times. But after Jonah went to bed, Ethan asked Lila to stay at the table. "I need to tell you something," he said. Lila looked at him, her expression cautious. "Okay." Ethan took a breath. "The night I found you and Jonah, I thought I was saving you. And maybe I was. But the truth is, you saved me too. I was so lost, Lila. I had everything and nothing at the same time. And then you and Jonah walked into my life, and suddenly everything made sense. You made sense. This makes sense." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "I love you," Ethan said. "I love Jonah. I love the life we've built together. And I don't want it to end. I want to build a future with you. A real one. Will you let me?" Lila covered her mouth, tears spilling over. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Jonah appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "What's happening?" Ethan laughed, and Lila pulled Jonah into her arms. "We're going to be a family," she said. Jonah looked at Ethan. "Really?" "Really," Ethan said. Jonah threw his arms around both of them, and Ethan held them tight, his heart so full he thought it might burst. The house wasn't quiet anymore. It was home.